Landing on My Heart, Chapter 47 at Infinite Good Text, all in Xinjiang Literature City. Cecile Ruan stood up and walked towards Louis Fu. She is tall and has long legs, and she only needs to take a few steps to the distance of these 2 or 3 meters, but she walks extremely slowly. A few people behind her only treated her as shy, and looked at her back with interest. Only Louis Fu on the couch clearly saw Cecile Ruan's eyes. She looked straight at him, and the decorated eyelids were only visible in the dim light that there were fine sequins, with a little golden light, which matched the shimmer of her eyes. It looks beautiful, but it's not so gentle. When she approached and leaned over, the two looked at each other, and their eyes met in that instant. Cecile Ruan's eyes seemed to say, "If you dare to think about anything today, you will appear on the grass boat tomorrow." Moments later, Louis Fu raised his arm and spread the chips in his palm. "Go ahead," Cecile Ruan smiled and grabbed the chips from his hand and said, "Thank you, Mr. Fu, I'm embarrassed to take it for nothing. If I lose, count it in my bonus." Louis Fu glanced at her and chuckled. After going around 800 circles, in the end, it was not he who paid for it. Cecile Ruan turned around with his chips. "Go on, it's still early, and I don't know who the deer died." Everyone instantly felt a little gloating, glancing back and forth at Louis Fu. I originally thought that this friend brought by Louis Fu was essentially a prefix, but unfortunately now it seems that it is far behind. After taking his seat, Cecile Ruan had just touched the card when he suddenly called a halt. "Wait a minute, I'll go to the bathroom." She got up and pointed at Louis Fu. "Don't move my cards, wait for me to come." There is a separate bathroom in the private room, and after Cecile Ruan closes the door, Zhu Dong and Ji Yan both look at Louis Fu with a smile. "See, people don't buy your account." Only Yan and Sher laughed out loud, but it was just a sneer. He finished the cards, turned around and asked Louis Fu, "Mr. Fu, do you think this is the benefit of having money?" Louis Fu ignored him, got up and put the remaining chips from the tray on Cecile Ruan's table before returning to the sofa. On the hand, it is sometimes taboo to play halfway. For example, Cecile Ruan went to the toilet, and when she came back, everyone suspected that she had changed her hands. It took an hour to clearly arrange a headwind turnover drama for everyone. Living like an emotionless money harvester, I saw her playing cards one after another, killing and deciding, without mercy. Every time they saw her, she collected the money, and Zhu Dong and Ji Yan even faintly felt that she was taking revenge. At the end of the hand, Cecile Ruan cleared the account and said triumphantly, "It's all won back." Louis Fu raised his eyebrows slightly and said, "Awesome." After the words fell, the room was subtly silent. Things finally developed like this. Zhu Dong and Ji Yan did not expect it, and Zhu Dong's girlfriend even faintly felt that the help she thought she was helping today might be a bad help. Everyone got up and walked to the restaurant together. Zhu Dong asked Xingyuan if she wanted to go together, but she did not refuse. She was just getting more and more confused. On the way to the restaurant, she turned her head and asked Yenin in a low voice, "What is their relationship?" Yenin tilted his neck to look at his phone, "Just like you see. All in Xinjiang Literature City." "What?" Yenin looked up at Louis Fu in front of him and said coldly, "When did you see Louis Fu take a woman out to play cards and she loses?" This sentence broke all the confusion tonight and explained it clearly to Xingyuan. She looked incredulously at the two people walking side by side in front of her. It is said that men are big pigs trotters, and as a result, someone gnaws happily than anyone. How can there be such people? Is it a modern new tactic to repel love enemies? Yenin glanced sideways at her, and saw that her expression was broken, and even her steps slowed down. Thinking of what happened to her and Louis Fu, and having to sit with him for a while today, Yenin suddenly understood her psychological state at this time. Not happy, Xingyuan tugged at the corners of his mouth. "What am I unhappy about? I just felt a betrayal." Yenin narrowed his eyes, "But I'm not happy, damn it." After playing cards all afternoon, not to mention more physical effort, but also mental exercise, the atmosphere at the dinner table was much more relaxed. After everyone knew that Louis Fu's progress was different from what they imagined, they stopped teasing these two. Listening to their small talk about work, Cecile Ruan did not participate in the topic the whole time, focusing on eating. But she can still feel the death gaze from Xingyuan from time to time. Cecile Ruan was really stared at by her, so she had to pretend not to see it. But when she was about to eat the pig's trotters, the eyes on the other side were cold, and she had no appetite. "Just put down the chopsticks." Xingyuan propped up his chin and looked at her, and spoke. "What's wrong? Isn't this pig's trotter to your liking? I just saw that you were eating well. Cecile Ruan passed it with a heavy look. It's okay, I'm done. Louis Fu next to him looked back at her. No more food. Cecile Ruan forced a smile. No thanks. Seeing this, Ji Yan asked the waiter to serve Cecile Ruan some desserts. He is the oldest in between, and has been taking care of everyone since he was a brother from an early age. Seeing that Cecile Ruan had eaten well, he thought that Yenin hadn't spoken much all day today, and he was drinking alone during the meal, so he asked, by the way, Yenin, how are you and that female flight of World Airlines? Caught up? Cecile Ruan choked on this expensive coconut waterbird's nest. Louis Fu glanced at Ji Yan silently, and the other party didn't realize that anything was wrong. He didn't come to the birthday party last time, Zhu Dong's girlfriend. I don't know the situation, and at this time he really cares about his friend's emotional state. What's going on? Xing Yuan casually asked. You also chased the female flight of World Airlines. Zhu Dong heard them ask this, and didn't care. This kind of question is nothing to avoid, but he just felt that it was a little pitiful to open Yenin's scars, so he helped him answer. It's all in the past, don't mention it. Yenin was also very helpless when he was Q, and drank a large sip of wine and pretended not to hear it drunk. But reality tells Cecile Ruan that money isn't so easy to earn. As soon as Zhu Dong's words fell, her girlfriend asked again, by the way, Miss Ruan, where do you work? Cecile Ruan. For the first time in my life, I was so ashamed to say what I was doing. Oh, I work for World Aviation. What are you doing? Xing Yuan suddenly blinked her eyes and rushed to answer. She is the female flight of World Airlines. The atmosphere at the scene suddenly froze because of Xing Yuan's words. Several lines of sight brushed onto Cecile Ruan and Louis Fu. She covered her mouth, and directly picked out the embarrassment hidden in the air. Cecile Ruan laughed stiffly while the hand under the table pinched Louis Fu's thigh. Louis Fu held her hand, but his face was calm, and he looked at Xing Yuan. Yes, I finally recruited a female pilot. What's wrong? The meaning of the words is very clear, the subtext attitude is tough. Xing Yuan didn't know what to say for a while. The last topic came to an abrupt end when Yenin blushed and his neck plopped on the table. The meal ended early amid everyone's forced laughter. As Cecile Ruan walked out of the hall, a cold breeze blew and she finally felt alive. At the same time, Bian Xian and Si Xiaozhen asked her how she was today, and she replied, it's not easy to make money, everyone will save a little later. After getting on the bus, Cecile Ruan and Louis Fu sat on either side, as if there was a 3/8 line in the middle. She stared dejectedly at the car window without saying a word. She shouldn't have agreed to Louis Fu to come to this dinner for a while. She had this time to do something bad. She had to come to experience a human azure field. Louis Fu saw Cecile Ruan's expression in the reflection of the car window and asked, tired? 10 times. All in Xinjiang Literature City what? Cecile Ruan stared back at him reluctantly. 10 times the quarterly bonus. So expensive. Expensive. Cecile Ruan wanted to blow his dog's head on the spot. Originally, she didn't really ask him for money, but just wanted to express that the inhuman treatment she suffered today was too cruel, and if she took the quarterly bonus as a ruler, it should be 10 times. And he is actually too expensive. Cecile Ruan seriously suspects that his family property was cut out. She didn't bother to pay attention to the man who was seized and searched, and turned her head to continue the street lamp outside the window. Half a minute later, Cecile Ruan's phone rang. She took it out and saw that it was a WeChat transfer from Louis Fu. It's really 10 times her quarterly bonus. Louis Fu, it's been hard work today. After giving him all back, Cecile Ruan looked down and typed. Cecile Ruan, for Mr. Fusake, let's give you a 0% discount. Louis Fu, so can Miss Nguyen turn around and talk to me now? Cecile Ruan looked up to see his own reflection in the window overlapping Louis Fu's, but he could also be seen laughing. I was inexplicably flustered, feeling that this turn would fall into some abyss. Cecile Ruan, I'll sleep. After saying these words, she leaned her head against the car window and immediately closed her eyes. Because Warner Manor is on the western suburbs of the hills, the road winds and the driver drives slowly, and the speed is very hypnotic. After about 10 minutes, Cecile Ruan was really drowsy, and his head began to swing from side to side with the curve of the path. Suddenly, a warmth approached her. When her consciousness was blurred, she subconsciously approached the warmth, tilted her head, and leaned on the shoulder of the person next to her. Louis Fu's hand slowly ran through the gap between her back and the cushion, holding her in his arms and no longer swaying along the way. The car drove slowly down the hill, and the downtown lights were red. Louis Fu lowered her head and found her face close at hand, and the colorful neon light through the car window jumped like small sequins on Cecile Ruan's face. He smelled the orange scent on her, and a few hairs wrapped around his neck, tickling. It seemed that a most primitive driving force was at work, and when he came back to his senses, he had already dropped a kiss on her forehead. Obviously, it was just a kiss from a dragonfly, and it even produced a feeling of stealing incense and jade. Thinking of this, Louis Fu laughed at himself. He raised his head, trying to distract himself from the self-deprecation in his heart, and turned his head to look out the window. I didn't feel the heartbeat of the person in my arms like a drum. Landing on my heart. Chapter 48. The warmth of the forehead remained like a brand for a long time, and even the temperature of the cheeks rose sharply, making this shallow head-leaning hug unusual. Cecile Ruan felt that it was getting harder and harder to pretend. If Louis Fu had looked back, he would have seen her eyelashes trembling unnoticeably. The temperature of his body is fascinating, the curvature of his arms is just right, there is no sense of shackles, hard, but there is a gentle feeling. One more second at most. Cecile Ruan thought, she's going to be overwhelmed, and there's a stream of heat in her chest, boiling, rampage, about to burst through her ribcage. All in Xinjiang Literature City. She frowned tightly, and was about to open her eyes when a cell phone ringing sounded in the car. Louis Fu's phone. He took out his phone with his other hand, put it to his ear, and spoke softly. Cecile Ruan took advantage of his attention and took a gentle breath. Sick. All in Xinjiang Literature City. Louis Fu's posture remained unchanged, but he glanced down at Cecile Ruan's sleeping face, and his voice became lower. Okay, I see, I'll be back later. After two simple words, he hung up the phone, and the car continued to be calm. At this fork, the tightness in Cecile Ruan's chest slowly relaxed. Although the heartbeat is still abnormal, it is much calmer than it was just now. In his ears was the sound of Louis Fu's steady breathing, and the faint scent of his body lingered on the tip of his nose. Cecile Ruan remained leaning against his arms, but felt his hand tighten at her shoulder. The feeling of nervousness returned because of the temperature of his palm. At the same time, he turned his head sideways, and his chin gently brushed the top of her head. Cecile Ruan didn't know why she was so nervous at this time, even more than the kiss on her forehead just now. Obviously there was a more intimate hug last night than at this moment. There was an undulating whistle outside the window, and at this time, it was like the music that flowered, and there was a quiet and ordinary pleasant feeling. Although it was difficult to calm down, Cecile Ruan thought uncontrollably about this road, a little longer, a little longer. She began to think back to everything that happened today, and slowly found a reason for herself. Perhaps because today's embrace, there is no comfort, there is no desire to absorb security, it is simply the embrace of a man and a woman. The most primitive and direct expression of affection, like a pair of lovers who have been in love for a long time, naturally lean together. She took another long breath. Nasal breathing can no longer maintain oxygen to the brain. Louis Fu is a man who is sometimes too desperate, his warm water comes too naturally. People do not feel aggressive, but they fall unknowingly. She couldn't even imagine that she would one day lean into his arms like this and be kissed on the forehead by him. And did not resist at all, and even recalled it over and over again in his heart. Until she felt the car slowly stop. It should have reached the gate of the famous courtier's apartment. Remembering the phone call he had just answered, Cecile Ruan felt that he could no longer pretend that someone in his family was sick. Cecile Ruan slowly opened his eyes. Louis Fu did not notice, just calmly looked ahead. She coughed lightly and slowly straightened her upper body. Awake, Louis Fu looked sideways at her, his breath on her face, and his arm naturally let go of her. Cecile Ruan didn't look at him, turned his head and stared out the window twice. Remembering the phone he just answered, someone at home should be sick, waiting for him to return, so he said, "Just send me here." The driver heard Cecile Ruan's words and looked back at Louis Fu. Louis Fu just said, "Send it in." Cecile Ruan pursed her lips, did not speak, looked at her reflection in the car window, and quietly touched her face. The car slowly drove downstairs through the brakes, and Cecile Ruan's expression was adjusted to the most natural state. At the same time that Cecile Ruan opened the door, it felt Louis Fu open the door on the other side. She hurriedly said, "Just send me here." Louis Fu braced his arm on the car door, looked at her, didn't say anything, just walked around to her. "I'll send you up." Okay. Cecile Ruan followed him into the elevator hall in silence. While waiting for the elevator, Cecile Ruan's fingers gripped the shoulder straps of his backpack uncontrollably. She found that when she calmed down, her emotions began to be unstable again. Louis Fu stood next to her, not talking much as usual, but as if it were different. As if because of that kiss on the forehead, Cecile Ruan felt like he was doing nothing now, and everything was different. Even though his intentions have long been clear, there has never been such a clear intimate action, a unique intimate action between a man and a woman. Until the elevator door opened, Louis Fu followed her inside. "Do you still want to go up?" Cecile Ruan asked. Louis Fu smiled and said, "What's going on with you today? Can't I go up?" Even if he didn't say that he wanted to send her to the door, he also lived upstairs, why couldn't he go up? "No, there is no one in your family." The words fell, and the two were silent at the same time. Seeing Louis Fu's inquiring eyes, Cecile Ruan didn't open his face. Because of the weakness of his mouth, his eyes did not know where to fall. The elevator doors closed silently, and the air around them suddenly became overwhelming. Cecile Ruan felt Louis Fu approaching her. "You're not asleep." Cecile Ruan was speechless. Louis Fu put one hand in his pocket, leaned closer, the air pressure of his body wrapped her invisibly, looked down, raised his eyebrows, and his eyes gradually became direct, implying something. "There is no way, the circle will not go back." Cecile Ruan raised his head and raised his chin. "Why? Is it still reasonable for you to steal a kiss from me?" Louis Fu just looked at her deeply, did not speak, but smiled at the corner of his mouth. Cecile Ruan probably understood the look in his eyes. "Then you didn't react, and even pretended to sleep all the time. This means that you don't reject it, right?" The things he didn't understand were directly poked by him, and a hot breath surged up. Cecile Ruan didn't know whether he was ashamed or annoyed, and stepped on him. He didn't dodge, he didn't even change his expression at all. Louis Fu leaned over and got closer and closer. Cecile Ruan was forced into a corner by him, his back against the elevator wall, and the cold marble became hot. No one pressed the elevator, the small space stood still, and the air seemed to be stagnant. As soon as he spoke, his breath immediately wrapped around. "Then I still want to step in, okay?" It ended with an inquiry, but without any intention of asking. He bowed his head and kissed him. Louis Fu touched her lower lip lightly, tasted it lightly, and when he felt her subconsciously retract, he opened his eyes and saw her eyes closed, her eyelashes fluttering slightly. After a pause, Cecile Ruan slowly opened her eyes to meet his gaze, and for a second she reacted. He was just testing her attitude. And the stagnation at the moment was his confirmation of her eyes. Cecile Ruan didn't know what kind of eyes he was looking at this time, but he felt like his heart was about to jump out. She hadn't thought it would be like that tonight. She didn't expect such a substantial contact, which was unexpected and completely out of control, but her brain and body were completely unreasonable with her, and she was completely led by Louis Fu. She half opened her mouth and wanted to take a deep breath to calm her mood, but Louis Fu withdrew his hand, held her face, and kissed it completely without restraint. The smell of alcohol poured in one after another. I don't know which family upstairs pressed the elevator, and the two people were slowly rising, but they didn't feel the changes around them. Cecile Ruan's back was pressed against the elevator wall, and the weightlessness of his mind and body hit at the same time, until the elevator doors suddenly opened. It was the 10th floor again, and the old lady who led Labrador looked at the situation in the elevator, stunned, and immediately held down the dog that was jumping alive. Cecile Ruan instantly sobered up and pushed Louis Fu hard. He didn't move, just glanced back. The eyes were arrogant and unscrupulous, frightening the old lady's old face red, dragging the dog back. "Excuse me, you guys continue." The dog was reluctant to go, and was still bouncing in the elevator, and the old lady dragged the rope hard. "Dog stuff, walk. Walk, walk. Go home, Cecile Ruan." Cecile Ruan looked at Louis Fu's jawline and saw him slowly turn, his chin rubbed over the tip of her nose, and he lowered his head and kissed the corner of her lips. "Sister, give me a response." His fingers brushed the hair on the side of her cheek, brushing his fingertips delicately, and he wanted to kiss it again. The sanity in Cecile Ruan's head was finally pulled back by the old lady's dog thing. All in Xinjiang Literature City Dog Stuff.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to our channel for more captivating illustrated romance audiobooks. Don't miss out on our latest releases and be part of our growing community. Hit that subscribe button and embark on an enchanting journey with us.
Landing on My Heart, Chapter 49. It feels magical. When Cecile Ruan came home, he leaned against the door for a while. She actually kissed Louis Fu. She still felt that her body was filled with his breath, and that voice seemed to linger in her ears. Her brain was like uncontrolled, driven by primordial hormones. When the elevator doors opened, although she was tightly blocked by Louis Fu, she could still imagine the expression of the subway grandfather looking at the mobile phone when the old lady outside the door saw them. Cecile Ruan thought of this, his legs went limp, and he almost fell into his home. This is so bad. What did Louis Fu do to her? Kissing people in a variety of ways, completely overwhelmed. If she hadn't kicked him at the end, he probably wouldn't have thought to stop. Alcohol is on the brain. I don't know if he's drinking too much tonight or sober. Cecile Ruan walked slowly into the living room, and when she passed a cabinet with a mirror, she glimpsed that there was little lipstick left, and the original red color turned into a faint orange red, which was messily smeared on the lips. It seemed to remind Cecile Ruan of what she had just done with Louis Fu. Cecile Ruan changed her clothes, lay down in the bathtub, soaked in the shower for a while. Her phone rang non-stop, and she was bored. She grabbed it casually and glanced at it. It was Si Xiaozhen and Bian Xian chatting in the group. Si Xiaozhen posted several screenshots of Korean dramas in the group. Si Xiaozhen, woohoo, this elevator kiss, my heart moved. Cecile Ruan. She let go of her phone, stared at the ceiling for a while, felt it still vibrating, and picked it up again. Needless to say, the pose in that screenshot is really similar to what they are today. The male protagonist is also wearing a suit, blocking the female protagonist in a corner and burying her head in a kiss. Even the back is a bit like Louis Fu. Si Xiaozhen, woohoo, when will it be my turn to kiss so sweetly, and I'm all in a good position. Cecile Ruan. Si Xiaozhen, woo-woo, I want a man who puts me in the elevator and kisses me deeply. Cecile Ruan. Cecile Ruan did not bubble up the screen from beginning to end. Lying in the bathtub, his heartbeat had not slowed down, the heat lingered, and the whole person was dizzy. She felt like she was being kissed by Louis Fu today, and delirium. Today the weather is bad during the day, the dark clouds are shaky, and the heavy rain will not fall, but at night, the moonlight will remove the thick fog and reveal a hook. Louis Fu walked downstairs and wiped his thumb to his lips, and under the moonlight, the lipstick on his fingertips had a faint pearlescent residue. The driver was still waiting on the side of the road, and after he got into the car, he drew a tissue and wiped the lipstick off his mouth. The lipstick remaining on the mouth is transferred to a white paper towel, a light shade of red. The visual stimulation instantly brought sensory memories, and Louis Fu rubbed his neck and recalled the scene just now. When the elevator door was about to close again, Cecile Ruan seemed to wake up like a dream, and subconsciously bit him. His strength was not small, and the corners of his mouth still hurt a little. And she braced her hands on his chest, panting for a long time, her face flushed to the base of her neck, before she said, someone in your family is sick, you still want to do this and that, Louis Fu, you are still not a person. I don't know whether it was angry or funny. Louis Fu rubbed the tissue in his hand, and the corners of his mouth smiled shallowly. Go to the Huguang mansion. Before Helan Xiang suddenly called him, saying that Dowda was sick, half dead, and asked him to hurry back to see his dog. Her tone was impatient, and her sharp voice was a little mean, sounding less like a pet and more like accusing Louis Fu of abandoning her own son. With Louis Fu's understanding of Helan Xiang, he could expect a bad tonight. Half an hour later, the car stopped in front of the villa. As soon as Louis Fu pushed open the door of the first floor, Dowda rushed over alive. He bent down and touched Dowda's head, and walked into the living room, but he didn't see Helan Xiang. Aunt Luo came over and took the coat he took off and pointed to the second floor. Louis Fu didn't care, went to get a glass of water first, stood in front of the window and drank it slowly. Half a cup of underwater belly. The familiar sound came from the stairs. You still know to come back. Did you know you have a home? Louis Fu turned around and said, this dress is good. Helan Xiang did not by his account, standing on the stairs with her arms folded, and the height gave her the upper hand in momentum. Originally, I thought you were busy and couldn't see anyone. But what do you mean by asking people to move all the model aircraft? Is it completely going to move out? All in Xinjiang Literature City. Louis Fu raised his eyes and did not deny it. He seems to have this idea. Just at this time, Aunt Luo took Louis Fu's coat upstairs and prepared to go to the workshop to clean up, and when she passed by Helan Xiang's side, the fragrance that belonged to a woman came faintly. Helan Xiang smiled. I know that if I can't see a figure in 10 days and a half month, I must have a girlfriend. If I don't call you, you may not even find your way home, right? Remembering the kiss tonight that was not rejected, Louis Fu was non-committal about the term girlfriend. He Xiang walked down and stopped a meter away from him, his gaze slowly scanning from top to bottom. This is nothing, but not long ago, the slap print on your face. Louis Fu raised his eyebrows. Bo Yang told you. Do you still use Bai Yang to tell me this? He Xiang's voice suddenly rose 2 degrees. You were born to me, I still don't understand. Are you really when you wear a mask and I can't find out? You have the ability to wear it 24 hours a day, don't take it off when you eat. Louis Fu only felt that his brain was heavy, and he didn't want to continue this topic, and was about to turn upstairs to take a bath, but was pulled by He Xiang. Don't you explain who hit you? It's a woman, right? She thought that no man would slap him, so she pointed to her face and said, there will be a girlfriend again. Wouldn't you be? The relationship between men and women, right? He Xiang felt that he was thinking too right. While planning to move out, not at home all day, and smelling of perfume on his body, he was slapped, and there was no other reason except the chaotic relationship between men and women. Louis Fu, I'll tell you, you can't do this kind of thing. I can't afford to lose this person. Louis Fu rubbed his brow, not knowing how to communicate with his mother, whose thoughts were sometimes crooked to Siberia. Fun, you don't care. He Xiang was stunned, and it took a while to react to what Louis Fu meant. Ugh, then you young people are quite good at playing. The night is as cool as water, and the autumn moon is white, shining into the room through the curtains, sprinkling a hazy light and shadow, quiet and soft. Louis Fu's dream, on the other hand, was not as soft as this night, and the scene in the night reappeared. He saw Cecile Ruan's moisture-filled eyes again, hazy than the moonlight, vaguely reflecting his reflection. She wrapped her arms around his neck and rubbed her chin against his chin, her movements extremely slow. He lowered his eyes, looked at the epaulets, buttons, and moved his gaze to her waist inch by inch. Waking up in the middle of the night, Louis Fu opened her eyes and looked out the window. The moonlight was shining, and the curve curved like a smile at the corner of her mouth. He took a long breath and got up to take his second shower tonight. At 5 o'clock in the morning, the alarm clock went off on time. Cecile Ruan opened her eyes, stared at the ceiling, blinked, and took a moment to pull back into her thoughts. Still a little hot, she patted her chest and immediately got out of bed to wash. Regardless of whether there is a flight mission that day, her morning run is a habit that cannot be moved. In addition to maintaining physical fitness accidents, it also has the effect of calming people. An hour and a half later, Cecile Ruan appeared at the World Aviation Building. Every morning is always the busiest time. The flight crew pulls the flight box from all the passages, and the sound of the rollers rolling out is intricate and disorderly. The dispatch department was full of paper, and the telephone calls of the flight planning department never stopped. Cecile Ruan met the crew on the road and walked towards the conference room together, with the sound of hatchet, small talk, and mixed noises in her ears. But these sounds flew into a vacuum the moment she saw Louis Fu's figure. Louis Fu seemed to have sensing, stood at the end of the glass corridor, turned his head and glanced at it faintly, and then continued to walk towards the elevator. There were many people behind him, not noticing his subtle movement. But Cecile Ruan knew he was watching her. Probably because of last night, Cecile Ruan now just glanced at the crowd from such a distance, and Cecile Ruan felt that it was not so simple. All in Xinjiang Literature City, the temperature of the cheeks began to be abnormal again. What for? Can you calm down? Isn't it just a kiss? Isn't it just a fight with tongues? What's there to blush? He was expressionless and nothing. What are you blushing? She coughed lightly and lifted her feet towards the conference room. The next second, the phone rang. As if she had some premonition, she took out her phone and looked at it, and sure enough, it was Louis Fu's message. Louis Fu, send me a message when you land. Look, how calm people are. The captain came early today. He had already signed the flight slip, and by the way, even the fuel was added, so everyone went straight to the topic as soon as they arrived. The weather was good, the route was familiar, and there were no VIPs, so the collaboration was short, and after the end, the group was ready to board. Since it was still early, a flight attendant dragged Cecile Ruan to the terminal to buy food. Today is the weekend. There are many people in the terminal. Jing Yuan and Dong Xian walked to the first-class lounge, and it took 10 minutes to finish the complaining all night. Originally, my hatred of Louis Fu was only 7 points, but that night I drank with her, and she complained more accurately than me, which made my dislike of him suddenly rise to 10, but she quickly became with Louis Fu. Did she do it on purpose? Is it because I have too little knowledge? Can I still repel my love rival like this? Dong Xian listened to Jing Yuan's complaining along the way, although she didn't know who she was talking about, but she also felt that it was just a trick between children, and she didn't pay much attention to it. The past is gone, why should you take it to heart again? No, I can't figure it out, I feel like I've been tricked. Dong Xian slowed down and glanced at her slowly. Do you still like Louis Fu? What a joke. Jing Yuan rolled her eyes. I now think that brother Yenin is better than him. Dong Xian chuckled. Aren't they all the same? Is there less lace news for Yenin? It's just a mess, a well-hidden, not a good person. When Jing Yuan heard this, he shut up a little weakly. At first, she was so angry with Louis Fu that she swore that she would be at odds with him for the rest of her life. But her father felt that this was not a big deal, and even felt that Louis Fu did nothing to blame. Compared with the interests of the two families, this was simply a small fight, forcing her to continue to deal with Louis Fu. Jing Yuan felt that no matter how good Louis Fu was in the eyes of the elders, insulting her artistic attainment was a matter of three views. It is absolutely impossible for the three views to come together. But her father kept whispering in her ear, telling her to put down her body. Louis Fu really couldn't fault it, missed this village and lost this shop. She couldn't stand it, so she made so little small rumors to accurately strike Louis Fu's image in her father's heart. For example, she said that when we went to Spain together, Louis Fu saw the samba girls and couldn't walk the road, and they talked to people, and then they had to take a car with her, who knew who was in the car. At the same time, he also said that he and the female employees in the company did not seem to be clear, and she had seen it when she died on the flight. This kind of plausible thing is so meaningful. Plus Jing Yuan is a good girl, her father does not think she lied. After thinking about it carefully, Louis Fu's identity and appearance seem to be normal. There is no emotion to cultivate slowly, but he does not believe in the story of the prodigal son looking back, no matter how beneficial the two marriages are, and he does not want his daughter to marry such a person. This matter will be settled. But Jing Yuan's father is a person with an extremely strict mouth, and he has never heard him talk about other people's affairs. Dong Xian is also a person who does not like to say right and wrong, so this kind of rumor will definitely not spread, so Jing Yuan dares to do this. Anyway, I think it's excessive. Jing Yuan turned the topic back again. I trusted her so much at the beginning, I confided in her without meeting her a few times, and she turned out to be good. Walking to the door of the first-class lounge, the welcome lady gave them a question mark. Jing Yuan closed her mouth, glanced at it casually, saw a familiar figure at the drink stall on the side, and stopped immediately. Ah, it really means that Cao Cao has arrived. Dong Xian turned around. What? All in Jinjiang Literature City, that's her, the person I just talked about. Because of Louis Fu's relationship, Cecile Ruan has not waited for a long time for the flow control, and often the guests almost push out the plane after getting on, so she also turned off the plane when she entered the cockpit today. After returning in the afternoon, it was dark and there was a tendency to rain. As soon as she turned on the phone, many WeChat messages came one after another, and one by one she read the replies, and pulled up below, which was the one Louis Fu sent her in the morning. Cecile Ruan thought about it and gave him a squeak back. Louis Fu told her to wait in the underground parking lot for a while, and he came right over. Cecile Ruan looked at the weather and it could rain in 20 minutes. During this time, she was almost used to Louis Fu picking her up, so she turned around and went to the parking lot. The high-rise parking space of World Airlines is specially divided into a piece. Usually there are not many people, very quiet. After Cecile Ruan took the elevator down, he didn't know where Louis Fu's parking space was, so he stood in the elevator hall, playing with his mobile phone. When brushing Weibo, a text message comes in, and the head-up bar directly previews the content. Dong Xian, if I have something to tell you, answer the phone. Cecile Ruan usually answers Dong Xian's phone completely depending on her mood, but when something really happens, she will not be persistent, such as the last time her aunt was sick. If she didn't answer, she may not know it yet. A few seconds later, Dong Xian's call came. Cecile Ruan picked up and asked directly, I'll go see my aunt in 2 days. I'm not telling you about it. Dong Xian just got off the plane and deliberately avoided Jing Yuan, making a call in the bathroom. What's going on? Dong Xian pondered for a moment. She and Cecile Ruan couldn't maintain even the most basic daily communication, and suddenly said that kind of thing, and she didn't know how to open her mouth for a while. But today, listening to Jing Yuan talk about Cecile Ruan's relationship with Louis Fu, she thought about it for a while on the plane, but decided to talk to Cecile Ruan about it. You and Louis Fu. Together, Cecile Ruan was stunned when he heard this, and his other hand gripped the lever of the flight case. What did Jing Yuan tell you? You know her. She told you about this. Can we not know each other? Dong Xian took a breath, and her tone became softer. She told me, and I only found out today. Cecile Ruan's heart was inexplicably blocked. I just called her today, and the tone was so careful. Was she afraid that she would rob Jing Yuan's man? Do you know Louis Fu? I mean, his conditions may indeed be more attractive to girls, but there are some things you don't necessarily understand. Maybe he is not so suitable for you. Do you know me well again? How do you know we're not suitable? Cecile Ruan was a little angry when she heard this, and she didn't want to talk to Dong Xian about this topic. I'm in my 20s and have my own judgment. You don't need to tell me this. Dong Xian was slightly stunned. You listen to me first. You don't have to say anything, we're just together, and I don't need to know my boyfriend from other people's mouths. That's it. Cecile Ruan hung up directly. However, the emotions caused by this phone call have not yet calmed down, and another wave has begun in my heart. She looked through the marble wall in front of her and saw a person standing behind her. No need to look back, you know who it is. Recalling what he had just said, Cecile Ruan's brain buzzed and suddenly felt the urge to die in place. She stiffened and didn't move, and neither did the man behind her. The phone rang suddenly. Louis Fu, I overheard a conversation in the parking lot. Cecile Ruan. Louis Fu, that person seems to be my girlfriend. Cecile Ruan. Louis Fu, look at that back, it seems to be you. Cecile Ruan. Not knowing where the last stubbornness came from, Cecile Ruan stiffened his neck and replied, humbly hoping to break this awkward impasse. Cecile Ruan, you can tell it's me when you look at the back, but it's really a mountain of fatherly love. After the message was sent, there was no reply, but she felt the man behind her approaching her, leaning over to her ear, and a familiar fur smell hit her. Whether you say angry words or not, I take it seriously anyway. Cecile Ruan. She still had her back to Louis Fu and didn't turn her neck. His breath was wrapped around her face. Like last night, lingering, with a bit of his smell, a little itchy, and a little demagogic. After a long time, Cecile Ruan spoke, it's not angry words. Landing on my heart. Chapter 50. Open the door, get in the car, sit down, fasten your seatbelt, everything is normal, and so normal. Cecile Ruan sat down slowly, in a standard posture as if in a physical class. She stole a glance at Louis Fu next to her. Louis Fu got into the car a moment slower than her. He raised his face, supported the steering wheel with one hand, buckled the seat belt with the other, and gently clicked, and the car started at the same time. He turned to look at Cecile Ruan. What are you looking at? Cecile Ruan stiffly withdrew his gaze and said calmly, there seems to be something on your face. Louis Fu raised his hand and touched his cheek, spread his palm and looked down. There was nothing. He just laughed and didn't poke Cecile Ruan. The car slowly drove out of the parking lot and came to the ground. Cecile Ruan could see many off-duty colleagues hurrying towards the door, and a man standing on the steps of the green belt opposite the security booth found the sports car and pretended to glance casually at the co-pilot. All in Xinjiang Literature City, this glance met Cecile Ruan's gaze. The other party didn't seem to have any special expressions, and looked away very naturally. Cecile Ruan read something from the man's eyes as if he were reading comprehension. Oh, Mr. Fu sent his girlfriend off work again. The feeling of unstoppable vanity in Cecile Ruan's heart increased again. It was so unreal that she even felt like she was imagining. At the beginning of next year, she saw that this man was still frying his hair every day, and she couldn't wait to engrave 6 big characters on his face, I don't want to see you. And her life seems to have been suddenly dragged by God to Louis Fu, and she domineeringly pulled a red line for them, without asking the parties to agree or not. It's hard to imagine that this person next to her is her boyfriend. The word boyfriend means a lot, tying 2 people together, and all kinds of things in life will be entangled. Just eat together and take a walk around the street, the most unusual things that only couples do, such as kissing, and even deeper behavior, have become a natural thing. Thinking of this, Cecile Ruan suddenly had a faint feeling of tightening in his scalp. His heart seemed to climb to his throat, and the part from his neck to his chest was swollen, and some could not find the north. It was dark early in late autumn, and before 7 o'clock, night had completely fallen. This road is not the way back to the Mingchen apartment. Cecile Ruan looked sideways at the driver man. Where are you going? Louis Fu unhurriedly stepped on the brakes and stopped at the traffic light. What do you want to eat? Cecile Ruan. Louis Fu turned to look at her. shouldn't I take my girlfriend to dinner? Oh, Cecile Ruan is still a little unused to the title of girlfriend, especially when she sees his eyes, and she feels a little trance. After the identity changed, Cecile Ruan felt that his eyes looked different. Very direct and a bit hooky. She opened her mouth, originally wanting to say to eat flower armor fans, but when the words came to her lips, it became what do you want to eat? Louis Fu didn't speak, just looked at her with a smile in his eyes. Cecile Ruan was a little embarrassed by her boyfriend, turned her head, looked at the indicator light in front of her, and said, West Wing Banquet. He seems to like this house. 10 minutes later, Cecile Ruan noticed that the road was not right. This is the direction towards the pedestrian street next to the Minomi apartment. She turned her head and glanced at Louis Fu. Don't you go to the West Wing Banquet? Louis Fu looked in the rearview mirror and neatly parked the car in the street parking area. Don't you like to eat this? Oh, Cecile Ruan began to unbuckle his seatbelt. It's okay. The corners of her mouth turned up, opened the door and got out. The car stopped on the right, and Cecile Ruan was facing the fan, and she and Louis Fu got out at the same time, but he had to take a few steps around to get here. Under the bright street lamp, she saw Louis Fu take out his mobile phone and answer a call, frowning, walking next to her, and taking her hand, naturally as if the two had been in love for several years. Obviously, it has only been confirmed for less than an hour. Bang bang. When the warm touch of the palm hit, Cecile Ruan's heartbeat was messed up twice. Louis Fu whispered something to the person on the other end of the phone, felt that the hand he was holding was a little hot, and looked back at Cecile Ruan. At the same time, Cecile Ruan, although panicked in his heart, also returned a what-to-see look back. Louis Fu smiled and led her inside. Well, let the engineering technology provide the fault retention information and operation limit information of the aircraft to you, and you will be in charge. Louis Fu's voice drifted a little farther away, and Cecile Ruan's attention was on the hand holding her. His palm was large and a little rough, and the skeletal feeling that belonged to a man covered her sensitive hand, making her a little ape. She found that when she kept thinking that this person was her boyfriend, the surroundings became particularly quiet, and the sound of her breathing and heartbeat was much more obvious. Since it was not yet time for dinner, and even the ordinary closing time was still almost the same, the shop surprisingly did not queue, and there were only a few customers in the store. Cecile Ruan really wants to eat flower armor fans tonight. On a cold late autumn night, what could be more tempting than a steaming bowl of flower armor fans? The boss even remembered the combination of Louis Fu and Cecile Ruan, and when the two of them walked in, there was a sense of confusion in their eyes that how delicious am I to attract this kind of person who looks like a domineering president for the second time. The two of you are here again, what to eat today? Cecile Ruan wiped the bench and said, Boss, do you remember us? Remember, of course I remember. There were not many guests, and the boss had the interest of small talk, wiping his hands twice on the apron on his waist. Where can you forget the two like heavenly immortals? Cecile Ruan was a little happy by the boss, smiled and nodded a sour and hot flower nail fan, and specially instructed the boss to put more flower armor and pay more. No, just add more to you, and you'll come back next time. The boss asked Louis Fu again, what about you, what to eat? Just now Bai Yong sent a few MEL/CDL project lists to be issued, which were more important. Louis Fu had to take time to look at his phone at this time, and said without raising his head, just like her. The boss heard a bit of perfunctory feeling from his tone, and immediately understood that it was not that he tasted too good here, and that people were just accompanying his girlfriend to the mortals. The boss left in response, and Cecile Ruan sat down opposite Louis Fu, only to see him staring at his phone, not knowing what he was doing, so he stretched out his leg and kicked him gently. What are you doing? Louis Fu looked up at her and said with some soothingness, the quarterly report of the aircraft department needs to be handled by me, you wait for me. What am I waiting for you to do? Cecile Ruan held her cheek and looked up at the store's television. When they first came in, the girl at the table behind them noticed them, and then Yomo heard some of their conversation, so he poked his boyfriend with chopsticks. You look at people's boyfriends, it seems that an elite is willing to come to this kind of small shop to accompany his girlfriend to eat. I told you to come out and cry, make trouble, and hang yourself. The conversation floated into Cecile Ruan's ears, and she looked over quietly to see the boy shaking his head and playing games, and said nonchalantly, then you don't look at what people's girlfriends look like. The girl was so angry that she grabbed the boy hard. While Louis Fu looked down at his phone, Cecile Ruan's gaze slowly fell on the side of Louis Fu's face. Tell yourself in your heart. This is your boyfriend, the boyfriend of your own admission. It's pretty good looking, not a loss. Thinking of this, she raised her head to watch TV again, but the corners of her mouth quietly curved a small arc. Louis Fu replied and looked up to see Cecile Ruan laughing. Laughing at what? Cecile Ruan glanced at him. Nothing. He added, you're happy today. Have it. Cecile Ruan pursed her lips and continued to watch the TV on the wall. You're mistaken. Louis Fu put down the phone, did not speak, followed Cecile Ruan's gaze and glanced back at the content on the TV, frowned, and then withdrew his gaze. Is TV that good? Even the new boyfriend doesn't take a second look. Cecile Ruan dragged her chin, her attention was no longer on the TV, but she still forced the cloud to be light and breezy and did not say anything. It's okay, this female star suddenly became popular this year. I feel that many movies and programs have her. I haven't heard of her before. I can't even remember her name before. What is Li Hishu? Louis Fu, Li Jihuai. Louis Fu's cold addition made Cecile Ruan stunned for a moment. She lowered her eyes and teased Louis Fu, you still care about these female stars. Louis Fu had a whatever you say expression. So what do you think she looks like? Okay, not bad. Cecile Ruan felt that Louis Fu really didn't have the slightest desire to survive. All in Xinjiang Literature City, how can you praise another woman in front of your girlfriend? Oh, is that the one you like? Louis Fu looked up at her with a faint gaze. Which one do you know? He seemed to be caught off guard and indirectly confessed. She had just been wondering if there was something between her and Louis Fu. Louis Fu never seemed to confess positively, nor did he ask her if she liked him, and directly crossed the procedure to kiss and confirm a relationship. Hearing this plausible but pointless remark, Cecile Ruan found himself quite happy. Just as 2 bowls of flour armor fans were served, a sour and spicy taste suddenly filled between the two. She picked up her chopsticks and said, I'll pick a flour armor for you. Louis Fu stared at the bowl from afar. No. Cecile Ruan began to pick and choose the flour armor with his own care. My boyfriend has condescended to be with me, so let me serve you. Then you might as well feed me a bite directly. All in Xinjiang Literature City. Why, girlfriend is embarrassed. Cecile Ruan made a move in her hand, slowly squeezed her chopsticks, and squinted at him. So sometimes you just can't treat Louis Fu too seriously. I can also be responsible for feeding you 3 meals a day in the future, and by the way, help you turn over every 2 hours. Do you want to try this touching love? Roll over. I can help you with this.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to our channel for more captivating illustrated romance audiobooks. Don't miss out on our latest releases and be part of our growing community. Hit that subscribe button and embark on an enchanting journey with us.